Hello photographer, welcome back to my channel. It's Belinda and this is where we talk all about photography, from inspiration to camera techniques to editing skills so that you could take better photos. Street photography used to be this spontaneous activity for me that I could do whenever I wanted as long as I have my camera with me and if I do actually remember to charge. But recently I've been holding it off for quite a while because it's such a pain to shoot in a mask on the streets of Hong Kong during its summer, and I wanted to wait till we could roam free on streets finally without a mask. But I also realized that it's not going to happen anytime soon, and I've also been itching to get some photos out on streets. For me, it's always photos over comfort, and that's why I still went. I went to explore the eastern side of Hong Kong Island a bit, so this video is going to be a point of view video. I will show you the behind the scenes of the shots that I took, the shots itself, and also briefly the editing process. So yeah, without further ado, let's get right in. This is what I call an easy shot. I knew that I could get the typical old Hong Kong look right here, and earlier this year I told myself that I'm not going to get easy shots. Essentially, shots that you know would look nice because you have already done this or seen this composition for so many times to an extent that it almost feels formulaic. This formula really hinders my creativity. But ironically, easy shots are sometimes what kickstarts a creative process for me, especially when I'm feeling uninspired. So, for the first shot of the day, I spot this scene and waited for a busy stranger to walk into the frame. I have a thing for shops selling roast duck and char siu because they look really raw, but for some reason I find them very photogenic. Well, enough of that, people are probably clicking away because of this duck fetish of mine. I saw this stall as I walked past, but the timing wasn't great. The shopkeepers were idling, but I wanted a shot of them working and serving customers. And they were already noticing me and they started making comments, so I took a turn down the streets and then I came back. This time there was a small queue and the chefs got cooking and chopping. Perfect for the shot. Further down the streets, there were a couple of shops selling Chinese medicine and ingredients in general. To locals, there is really nothing special about these stores because they're everywhere and they don't do business in a flashy, high-profile manner, so their stores are usually rather unassuming. These stores, though, naturally make a really good subject for street photography in Hong Kong because of the warm tones in the ingredients they display. It reminds people of age, of legacy, of a way of living, which is a large part of what makes up Hong Kong. It's really interesting how we as photographers, we go through phases in our journey. I remember a few years back, I was in this phase in my street photography where I tried to make sure that every single shot I took had some sort of wow factor and that I would only take a shot if I knew that it would turn out impressive to people who look at it. Just look at my old feed. Almost every shot had to have a thoughtful vantage point. It has to either contain some sort of symmetry or reflection, and I tried to do fancy stuff like rotations just to make sure that every photo looked catchy enough. So with this mindset, I was not able to comprehend why on earth would anyone be interested in documentary photography because it usually features normal people minding their own business in the most uninteresting way possible. But then I was fortunate enough to be able to live through a few more years. Well, maybe unfortunate to the human race, I don't know. I started to realize how things can change way quicker than we realize and that the human memory is really fallible. Like for example, try to recall what you were doing last week. I can't. And so this is how I came to appreciate the value in documentary photography. There is a wet market which I originally intended to shoot, but then I also saw this escalator next to it. It has an interesting geometry. My plan was to wait for this combination in which a person comes down the escalator to the bottom third of the frame, while another person goes up the other end to the upper third of the frame. So I stood there and waited for this to happen. I wouldn't be exaggerating when I say that street photography has made me a more patient person. I got this shot which I'm fairly happy with, but it would be great if this person ends up being here instead, which would give the image a more balanced look overall. Well, what do you think? Tell me in the comments below. I tried a few more clicks, but the people just would not line up with what I had in mind. And, well, those are one of those days, and so that was the closest I got because the sun was setting and I decided not to wait further. So back to the wet market. It is indeed an art to create art out of a crowded mess. Photographing crowds is a really fun challenge because firstly, you need a well-trained eye to quickly spot interesting scenes in the middle of chaos. Secondly, you need to quickly figure out how you're going to single out your subject from the rest of the crowd in terms of composition and color. And lastly, you will need a high degree of accuracy to execute that because these moments are usually fleeting and people's tolerance of other people standing in their way on narrow streets is pathetically low. I noticed this old man talking on his phone with a dramatic expression, so I quickly snapped a few shots of him as the crowd moved by him. There were a few different compositions, but this one turns out to be the best. For those of you who are interested, the behind-the-scenes footages in this video are shot on this action camera here, which is the Castle V50 Pro that I bought fairly recently. So I wanted to test it out while I got the street shots. What do you guys think about the video quality? Would really appreciate your feedback in the comments. And as for the regular photos, I've always shot on the Canon 5D Mark IV, which is my main camera, paired with a Nifty 50 by Yongnuo. In my opinion, the Nifty 50 is really a perfect lens for street photography, and if you want my opinion on what the Nifty 50 can do in general to your photography, here is a video about that. And well, if you're not interested in gear, then keep on watching. It's been a relaxing Sunday afternoon and it feels satisfying to finally be able to shoot on streets. At this point, the sun has already set and I was ready to call it a day, and so I turned off my action cam. But then, right at that moment I turned the cam off, this happened and this turned out to be, ironically, my favorite shot of the day, which I don't have footage for. Apologies. For this first shot, the main adjustment I had to make was the crop. The crop on the original was a bit too wide in my opinion. There was this wall on the left that we don't really need, and also it would look better if the person is placed in the left third of the frame. Also, the original shot was quite underexposed, and so the darker regions on the right was buried deep into the shadows. I wanted to recover some of that, so I had to lift the shadows to get some of that detail back. This shot is mostly a color play, and as I've just shared, the warm tones is what really breathes life into these shots. So I tidied up the various shades of warm colors, and also I accentuated the blue in the mask to create a stronger color contrast. As for this shot, it is mostly a composition play. It's about fine-tuning the crop so that the subjects take up the right portions of the frame. This photo also requires some exposure fix because it was shot in a rather high contrast environment and that the white balance was therefore a bit off too. I took another look at the other shots at this location just to make sure I'm happy with my selection, and indeed I am. These ones didn't really make it because there was just one person in the front which felt a bit bland. Picking between the two shots of the girl, I prefer the one in which she's closer to the camera, and honestly the rest were mostly just a bunch of random strangers, so yeah, let's move on. And this is my favorite shot of the day. A few things have to be done in this shot. Firstly, the perspective and the crop have to be fixed. Well, I'm not exactly a perspective Nazi, but where there's no reason not to, I prefer to have the verticals and the horizontal lines fixed in my shot so that it represents the space as is. The subject here is a woman in red, but the lights in the backgrounds are kind of busy and it takes away the attention from her. So I lowered the saturation of oranges and yellows, and I also lowered the highlights for this part, as we shall see. Another part that required some touching up is the tram in the foreground. It is a bit too dark, so I broadened it up, and it would also be better to lower its clarity and sharpness so as to enhance the softness given by the motion blur. Personally, I've always found point of view street photography videos really therapeutic to watch on YouTube because it feels like you're traveling and as if you're actually in a scene, and that's why I'm planning to make a series of point of view street photography videos of Hong Kong coming up, so let me know where you want me to bring you. If anything, let me know in the comments. If you found this content helpful and enjoyable, hit like, subscribe, hit the bell as well because this supports my YouTube channel massively. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!
A rainy night in Georgia. I believe that it's